When you meet an INFJ, it may not be immediately obvious. Their true nature unfolds subtly, revealing layers of complexity and warmth that distinguish them from other personality types. In this video, we will look at some of the signs that tell if someone is an INFJ. Check out our newly released INFJ Playbook. The link is in the description of this video. Get your copy now. One of the signs that tell if someone is an INFJ is their intense presence. An INFJ doesn't usually dominate conversations, yet there's something about the way they listen that feels magnetic. They tend to make others feel genuinely seen and heard, often asking thoughtful, open-ended questions that dive beneath surface-level chatter. Their gaze is focused but gentle, and you may sense a quiet attentiveness that signals they're absorbing more than just your words. They're watching your body language, picking up on tone, and tuning in to the emotional subtext of the conversation. A conversation with an INFJ often feels unusually deep, even if it starts off ordinary. They seem to invite authenticity, gently encouraging you to share more than you might with others. You may find yourself talking about things that matter to you without quite realizing how you got there. And when they speak, it's usually with purpose. Their words are carefully chosen, and they often express complex ideas with surprising clarity and emotional insight. They can appear warm yet distant, open yet private. INFJs are often mistaken for extroverts because of how well they engage in one-on-one interactions. But there's an unmistakable hint of inwardness about them. You might notice them withdrawing slightly after periods of interaction, not out of rudeness, but because their inner world demands solitude to recharge. They're most at home in rich, imaginative thought, and you might catch a momentary faraway look in their eyes, as if they're briefly retreating into a dreamscape that only they can see. INFJs often seem to just know things about people or situations without being told. If you've barely met and they already seem to grasp something about your emotional state or inner motivations, it's not manipulation or luck, it's their dominant function, introverted intuition, at work. They synthesize subtle data points, tone of voice, facial expressions, small inconsistencies, and derive meaning in a way that feels almost mystical. But to them, it's second nature. You might also notice a strong moral character. INFJs are guided by an internal compass that rarely wavers. Even in casual interactions, their values tend to shine through. They may be passionate about social issues, spirituality, art, or personal growth, not always overtly, but with a quiet conviction that reveals a deeply held vision for how the world could be better. They often speak in terms of ideals, long-term outcomes, and meaning. And while they're empathetic and supportive, they don't typically tolerate being fake or manipulative behavior. There's a quiet steeliness to them when boundaries are crossed. Creativity is another subtle sign. It might not always be through traditional art forms, although many INFJs do write, draw, or create music, but in the way they see the world. They often have a unique perspective that links abstract ideas with human emotion, producing insights that are both poetic and psychologically astute. You might hear them make metaphors that are unusually apt or describe feelings in ways that resonate deeply. They also have the ability to mirror others. INFJs are often emotional chameleons, adapting their demeanor to fit the emotional needs of the person they're with. This isn't out of a desire to deceive, but rather to build connection. Because they feel so deeply, they instinctively seek harmony. This ability can make them seem mysterious or difficult to pin down. They reflect so much of others that their own personality sometimes feels veiled. Also, there's often an aura of mystery. Even after a long conversation, you may realize that you know less about them than they know about you. They reveal themselves selectively, carefully, and usually only to those they truly trust. If you walk away from a conversation feeling both intrigued and slightly mystified, like there's so much more beneath the surface, that might be your strongest clue that you've just met an INFJ. They're also sensitive to energy. They may gravitate toward calm, aesthetically soothing environments or seem drained after being in chaotic or loud settings for too long. If you're in a group setting, watch how they position themselves, usually a bit on the edge, engaged but not at the center of attention. They prefer meaningful one-on-one connections over group dynamics, where superficial small talk often feels draining and pointless to them. When forced into group conversations, they might smile and nod politely, but their energy might dim slightly, and you may catch them zoning out or scanning for the nearest emotional exit. There's an uncanny maturity about them. Even the younger INFJs often seem older than their years. You might find their insights startling in their depth, as though they've already lived a dozen lives in one. They often reflect back something you hadn't quite put into words yourself, and in doing so, help you understand yourself more clearly. It's not uncommon for people to describe talking to an INFJ as therapeutic or eye-opening, even if the INFJ wasn't actively trying to play the role of a counselor. Their silence, when it comes, is rarely empty. An INFJ doesn't fill gaps in conversation just to keep things going. Instead, their pauses often carry as much weight as their words. You may notice them taking a moment before speaking, as if they're reaching deep into themselves for the most authentic response. That's because they often are. They can't stand shallowness or pretension. If they do engage in small talk, it's usually as a bridge towards something more substantial. They want to talk about purpose, healing, philosophy, dreams, meaning, not just weather, weekend plans, or gossip. There's a poetic quality to INFJs, sometimes even a haunting one. Their thoughts are often tinged with melancholy or a sense of the bittersweet. Even their humor may carry layers, dry, insightful, often self-deprecating. They might laugh quietly at a shared absurdity of life, or offer a clever quip that cuts straight to the emotional core of a situation. They're rarely flashy or loud in their humor, but sharp, well-timed, and deeply human. At times, you may sense a deep sadness or heaviness in them, even when they're smiling. INFJs feel things profoundly, not only their own emotions, but those of others, sometimes to the point of emotional exhaustion. They can be walking repositories for the pain of their friends, family, and even strangers. Their compassion runs so deep that they sometimes struggle with boundaries, taking on more than they should because they want so badly to help. Yet, paradoxically, they may struggle to ask for help themselves. Their inner world is often locked tight, not because they don't want to be known, but because they fear being misunderstood or worse, dismissed. They tend to avoid conflict, but that doesn't mean they're weak. When something deeply violates their values or someone they care about is harmed, they can display an unexpected fierceness. Their usually soft demeanor may suddenly sharpen, and their words, though still measured, cut with precision and power. An INFJ won't explode in anger. Instead, their disappointment may be expressed with chilling calm. You'll know when a line has been crossed, not by yelling, but by the sudden stillness in the room. Another strong indicator that you've met an INFJ is the way they seem to exist slightly out of sync with the world, not in a clumsy or awkward sense, but more like someone tuned to a different frequency. They might appear thoughtful when others are loud, reserved when others are eager to perform, or quietly amused while others chase attention. It's not that they lack social skills. On the contrary, they often read people with eerie accuracy, but they move through life with an inward orientation that's hard to imitate. Their choices, words, and even silences often feel intentional, as if rooted in a deeper narrative that only they fully understand. They give off the sense that they're carrying a story you haven't been told yet, a purpose that drives them even when they're not speaking about it. You may notice how much they observe before they act. INFJs tend to read the room thoroughly before engaging. They're not reactive. They're contemplative. They prefer to understand the dynamics of a situation before participating, and once they do, their contributions tend to be impactful. They speak with an uncanny sense of timing, often saying what others are feeling but haven't been able to articulate. In group settings, they might remain quiet for long stretches, then say something that shifts the entire conversation. The way they handle vulnerability is also another sign. INFJs are paradoxical in their emotional openness. They invite it from others while remaining guarded themselves. They want deep connection, but fear being misunderstood or emotionally overwhelmed. You may notice that while you feel deeply seen and understood by them, they keep parts of themselves just out of reach. When they do share something personal, it's often layered with meaning, delivered gently, and with the sense that it's only a small window into a vast inner world. They are incredibly private. Even if they're social or charismatic, there's always an air of mystery around them. They might deflect personal questions with grace, redirect the conversation, or answer with a quiet honesty that reveals very little detail. But the emotional tone of what they say often carries more than the content itself. You feel their depth even when you don't fully know their story. Their relationships tend to be few but deeply meaningful. INFJs don't spread their emotional energy thin. They're selective about who they let into their inner world. If you sense they're taking time to get to know you, it's not because they're unsure of your value. It's because they're measuring emotional compatibility and trust. When they do open up, it's usually because they've observed you, intuited your nature, and decided you're someone safe, someone who resonates with their values. You might also notice how they carry a kind of quiet idealism. INFJs are visionary by nature. They often dream of a better world, more compassionate, more meaningful. This idealism doesn't always show in loud activism or declarations, but it permeates their choices, their careers, their friendships. Whether they're working in healthcare, education, the arts, or any other field, they often seek to bring healing or transformation. They want their lives to mean something, not in a grandiose way, but in a soul-level sense of purpose. INFJs are also incredibly self-aware, often to a fault. They spend a great deal of time analyzing their motives, processing emotional experiences, and striving to grow. This inner work is part of what gives them their signature calm and emotional clarity. They usually have a strong inner dialogue, constantly questioning how they can live more authentically, love more fully, and contribute more meaningfully. They are dreamers, but grounded ones. You may hear them speak about the future as if it's already unfolding in their mind, and imagine life rich in meaning, relationships, and growth. They tend to hold long-term visions for themselves and others, and they often see potential in people before those people see it in themselves. They may gently encourage you toward your own higher self, planting ideas like seeds, then stepping back to let you grow in your own time. So if you've just met someone who leaves you feeling both comforted and intrigued, who listens like they're hearing more than your words, who connects as if you've known them forever, but remains partly cloaked in mystery, you just might be an INFJ. And if they keep showing up with quiet depth, subtle empathy, and a sense of meaning that resonates beyond the surface, you'll find that what you've experienced isn't just rare. Check out our newly released INFJ Playbook. The link is in the description of this video. Get your copy now.